My name is Laura Green, and I still don't really know why I kept hoping each year would be different. Maybe that's the thing about family. You keep holding out for a version that doesn't quite exist, even when the truth has been staring you in the face for years. This past Christmas Eve was supposed to be special. I drove 6 hours across snow and ice, with a gift box in the passenger seat and a playlist of old holiday songs trying to keep me upbeat. The plan was simple. Arrive by 3, help set the table and finally feel like I belonged. But somehow, even with all my planning and effort, my seat at the table wasn't waiting for me. It had been given to someone else. A neighbor. She's alone this year, my mom said. I don't know why that line hurt the way it did. Maybe because I've been alone for years. Not in the literal sense, sure I had coworkers, a roommate once, a few distant friends I texted on birthdays, but in the kind of way that settles deep in your bones when the people who are supposed to know you just don't. I had spent years working hard to build something, a life, a career, a version of myself I could be proud of. I was living in DC now, doing pretty well for myself. I wasn't rich or famous, but I was steady. And yet, every December, I turned back into the quiet girl sitting off to the side while my brothers told stories and my parents pretended not to notice. Growing up, it had always been that way. My dad, a small-town contractor who liked things simple, never quite knew what to make of me. I liked books, kept to myself, and didn't fit the mold of what he thought a daughter should be. You're too serious, he used to say, as if that were some kind of character flaw. My mom wasn't much better. She wasn't cruel, just busy and distracted, always fussing over my brothers, Jason with his baseball tournaments, and Eric with his broken skateboard or science fair mishaps. I was the easy one, so I got the leftovers. Leftover time, leftover attention, leftover affection. I remember one Christmas when I was 9. I had saved up my allowance for weeks to buy a scarf for Mom, blue, her favorite color. I wrapped it carefully and even made a little card. On Christmas morning, I watched her open it and say, "Oh, that's sweet, honey." Then she turned and started helping Jason put together his new train set. That moment lodged itself somewhere deep, and I guess it never left. This year, though, I really believed things would be different. Maybe because I had recently gone through a breakup, and the idea of spending Christmas alone felt unbearable. Maybe because I wanted to believe that people change, that time softens old habits. I had called ahead, checked in, offered to bring dessert and wine. My mom had sounded cheerful. "Of course, honey. You're always welcome," she said. "We'll have the big roast and mashed potatoes. Jason's bringing his new girlfriend. It'll be nice." So I packed a bag, wrapped my gifts, and left early that morning. The roads were icy, but I didn't mind. I imagined pulling up to the house with the porch light glowing and the smell of cinnamon inside. I imagined hugs, laughter, maybe even a moment where Dad would say, "Glad you're here, kiddo." I wanted to believe I was part of something. I arrived around 2:50 p.m. The driveway was full, so I parked on the street and walked up with my suitcase in one hand and the dessert tin in the other. When I knocked, the door opened and Mom greeted me with that same distracted warmth I'd always known. "Oh, Laura, you made it," she said, pulling me into a quick hug before turning to yell toward the kitchen. "Eric, take her bag upstairs, will you?" I stepped inside. The house smelled like garlic and nutmeg. Christmas music was playing, and there were coats and boots piled near the staircase. I spotted Jason on the couch with a woman I assumed was his girlfriend, both laughing at something on his phone. Eric walked past me without a word and grabbed my bag. I followed Mom into the kitchen, where she was basting a turkey and pouring drinks for the neighbor, Mrs. Bellamy, from 2 houses down. "This is Mrs. Bellamy," Mom said, handing her a mug. "She lost her husband in the spring, so we invited her for dinner." I smiled politely. "I'm sorry for your loss." Mrs. Bellamy nodded and patted my arm. "It's kind of your family to include me." I opened the tin and placed it on the counter. "I brought chocolate hazelnut pie. Your favorite, right, Mom?" She looked surprised, then said, "Oh, right. You remembered. That's sweet." She didn't sound unkind, just preoccupied. Like I was a guest, not her daughter. As the afternoon went on, I tried to help set the table, but the seats were already counted. 8 chairs. 8 plates. Mom, Dad, Jason and his girlfriend Eric, Mrs. Bellamy, and my aunt and uncle who had just arrived. I stood there, confused. "There's one extra," I said. "Where should I sit?" My mom hesitated. "Oh, right. Then she lowered her voice slightly, like she was trying not to make a big deal of it. Well, we only set 8 because the table's a little tight. But we thought maybe you could eat at the counter. The counter. In the kitchen. By myself. I blinked. You didn't save me a seat? She looked uncomfortable. It's just, Mrs. Bellamy's been really lonely this year. And you said you weren't sure you could make it. I never said that, I replied. I confirmed twice. I said I'd be here by 3. I must have misunderstood, she said quickly, brushing her hands on a dish towel. It's not personal. But it was. Even if she didn't mean it that way. I stood in that kitchen and watched everyone laugh and chat like they belonged to each other. I watched my own place disappear in real time. Something inside me began to ache. Not loudly but deeply. Like a dull, familiar bruise being pressed again. I'll be fine, I mumbled, walking out before anyone could answer. I went to the small den near the back of the house and sat down on the pull-out couch, staring at the wall. I could still hear them. The clinking glasses. The forks hitting china. Mrs. Bellamy's cheerful voice saying, "This stuffing is divine, Laura. You'll have to try it." Someone laughed. Dad offered a toast. No one noticed I hadn't joined them. Not even once. I stayed in that small den while the sounds of dinner carried on without me. Glasses clinked. Silverware tapped against porcelain. Chairs scraped as people leaned over for second helpings. Someone laughed a little too loud. I stared at the wall across from me, not even sure what I was waiting for. Maybe a tap on the shoulder. Maybe a plate. Maybe just for anyone to remember I was here. But nothing happened. Eventually I stood up quietly and walked toward the kitchen. My footsteps were soft, more out of habit than intention. I peeked in and saw the table fully occupied. My father was at the head, carving a second round of turkey. My aunt was asking Jason's girlfriend if she'd been to the ski slopes nearby. Mom was reaching to refill Mrs. Bellamy's wine glass. Everyone was talking. No one even looked up. I turned and walked out the front door. No one followed. The cold hit my face like a slap. I stepped off the porch and leaned against the railing. My fingers curled under my arms for warmth, but it wasn't the cold that made me shake. It was something else, something like embarrassment, only heavier. Like I had shown up to the wrong life. Like I had asked to be seen one too many times and finally gotten my answer. 6 hours. That's how far I'd driven. I had stopped for gas, eaten a stale granola bar in the car, and blasted old Christmas songs just to stay awake. I had brought presents for everyone, thoughtful ones, not just random things from a store shelf. I had baked pie. And in the end I was an afterthought. A backup. A maybe. I pulled out my phone, thinking I'd text Amanda, my old roommate. But I didn't want to sound pathetic. They gave my seat away to a neighbor. How do you even write that without sounding like you're exaggerating? So instead I sent her 3 words. It happened again. Her reply came quickly. Do you want me to call? I didn't answer. I just stood there blinking into the cold until my fingers went numb. When I finally went back inside, the kitchen was quieter. Dinner had ended, and people were starting to migrate to the living room. Someone had turned on the fireplace video on the TV, crackling logs, fake orange flames. Mom was clearing plates, humming to herself. When she saw me, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "Oh, there you are," she said. "We saved you some food. It's on the counter." I looked over. A paper plate covered in foil. Balanced on top was a plastic fork and a single folded napkin. "You okay?" she added, not really pausing to hear the answer. "I'm fine," I said. "Just got some fresh air." She nodded. "Well, grab a bite and join us. Jason's going to play that ridiculous trivia game again." I peeled back the foil. The food was already cold. I wanted to scream. Not because of the plate. Not because of the seat. But because of how easy it was for them to pretend none of it mattered. Like it was no big deal. Like giving my place away was just logistics, and sticking me with a takeout setup wasn't cruel. Why didn't anyone notice I was gone? I asked suddenly. Mom stopped wiping the counter. "What do you mean?" I was sitting in the den for an hour. No one came. No one asked where I was. She frowned, puzzled. "We just thought you wanted a break. You're always so quiet." I stared at her. I'm quiet because every time I speak, no one hears me. I'm quiet because trying to be noticed in this family is exhausting. Her eyebrows rose defensive now. That's not fair. Isn't it? I said. You had 8 chairs. You counted them. You placed them. And you didn't think twice about giving mine to someone else. She's alone, Laura. I'm alone, I said louder than I meant to. I've been alone for years. But you never saw that. You just assumed I'd be fine. I always am, right? The room behind us had fallen silent. I knew they were listening. Mom looked stunned. Laura, please. Don't do this now. Why not? Because the neighbors are here? Because it'll make Christmas awkward. I paused, heart racing. I've been waiting my whole life to be seen by this family. I've shown up every year, hoping it would be different. But it's not. And I'm done pretending that I don't notice. Don't be dramatic, Dad said from the living room without even turning around. That broke something. Clean in half. I set the plate back on the counter untouched. I think I'm going to leave. Mom's mouth opened but no words came. She looked at me like she didn't understand. Like I just started speaking a language she never bothered to learn. Jason stood up. Laura, come on. Don't make a thing out of this. I'm not making a thing. You already did. I'm just not staying for it. I walked past them all back to the coat rack. Slid on my jacket, grabbed my keys. Mrs. Bellamy stepped forward, hesitant. Laura, dear. I shook my head gently. It's not about you. I'm glad you had somewhere to go. But I should have had one too. No one stopped me. That hurt almost as much as everything else. Out on the porch, I paused for a second. Part of me waited to hear footsteps behind me. A hand on my arm. A wait. But it never came. The car was cold and smelled like plastic and peppermint. I sat in the front seat for a long minute before starting the engine. I didn't know where I'd go, back to the city, a cheap motel, Amanda's place if she was still awake. But I knew I wasn't going to sit at a counter and pretend I was welcome. As I pulled away, the porch light faded behind me, just like it had every year. Only this time I didn't look back. The highway stretched out like a ribbon of dark ice ahead of me, but I kept driving. My phone buzzed once, then again, but I didn't look. I knew who it was. Either Mom wondering where I went, or Jason telling me to stop being too sensitive. Maybe even no one. That possibility somehow hurt the most. I drove for 2 hours, not really heading anywhere. Just passing exit signs and thinking about how strange it felt to walk away without the usual guilt. It still stung, of course it did, but something was different this time. I didn't feel like I had made a mistake. I felt like I had finally told the truth. And the silence that followed wasn't loneliness. It was space. Space I hadn't had in years. Around 10 p.m., I pulled into a roadside diner. The kind with flickering lights and coffee that's always half-burnt. I sat in a booth and ordered tea. The waitress didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't have to. She just set the mug down gently and walked away. I stared at the steam rising from the cup. My hands were still cold, even though the heater in my car had been blasting. I think it was something else though, some kind of chill that had settled inside me a long time ago and finally started to thaw. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and opened Amanda's messages. Are you safe? Where are you? Want to come here? I typed back slowly. At a diner. Might take you up on that. Within seconds, she replied. Doors open. Couches ready. Come whenever. That was it. No judgment. No need for an explanation. Just, you're welcome. I paid for my tea, tipped extra, and got back on the road. Amanda lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. By the time I arrived, it was past midnight. The porch light was on. True to her word, the door was unlocked. She met me in the entryway with a blanket in one hand and a look of soft concern in the other. I figured you didn't want to talk yet, she said. I shook my head. Not really. She nodded and led me to the living room. The couch had fresh sheets. Pillow. Water on the table. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't say, I told you so. She just sat on the armrest for a moment and gave my shoulder a quick squeeze before heading to bed. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, surrounded by quiet that didn't feel heavy. The kind of quiet that lets you rest instead of burying you. I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't restless either. I just was. In the morning, Amanda had already made coffee and set out a slice of cranberry bread. It's not pie, she said with a smirk. But it's something. We ate in comfortable silence. When I finally told her what happened, she didn't flinch. "They gave your seat away," she repeated. "Yeah," I said. "To a neighbor. Because she was alone." Amanda tilted her head. "And they didn't think you might be, too?" I shrugged. "Guess not." She leaned back in her chair. "You've been trying to make space in that family your whole life. But maybe it's not your job to carve a spot where there never was one." That landed hard. "It wasn't always bad," I said quietly. "I know," she said. "But not being cruel doesn't mean they were kind. Not being hostile doesn't mean they saw you." I didn't respond right away. I was too busy letting that sink in. Later that afternoon, I finally checked my missed messages. 2 from Mom. 1 from Jason. A few from Eric that were just question marks. Mom said, "We didn't mean to upset you. It was just a mistake. Call me when you're calmer." Jason said, "You really left? Seriously? Eric's were just? Where are you? Mom's upset now. Thanks." I deleted them all. For the rest of that weekend I stayed quiet. Amanda didn't push. We went on a walk, watched a cheesy movie, and talked about nothing important. And slowly the ache in my chest started to dull. Not because it didn't matter, but because I had finally stopped waiting for it to be different. That Sunday night, I sat on Amanda's balcony wrapped in her extra blanket, watching the lights in the nearby windows flicker on one by one. Somewhere out there, my family was probably still telling their version of what happened. Laura made a scene. Laura overreacted. Laura walked out on Christmas. But for once I didn't feel the need to correct them. I didn't need them to understand. I needed peace. And for the first time in a very long time I was starting to feel it. A few days after New Year's I got a letter in the mail. Not a text. Not an email. An actual handwritten letter, in a cream envelope with my name on it in my mother's neat, slanted script. I held it in my hands for a while before opening it. I wasn't sure what I expected. A guilt trip? An apology with conditions? I wasn't ready for either, but I opened it anyway. It read, "Laura, I've been thinking about what happened. A lot. At first, I told myself you overreacted, that you were too sensitive. That's what I've always said, isn't it? That you're too this, too that. But the more I've thought about it, the more I realized, maybe it wasn't you at all. Maybe it was me who didn't see you. Maybe I've spent so much of your life focused on keeping the peace, keeping things running, that I didn't notice what was missing. You. I'm not writing to make excuses. I'm writing because I want you to know I hear you now. I wish it hadn't taken this long, and I don't know if you're open to talking, but if you are, I'll listen. And if you're not, I understand. Mom." I sat at my small kitchen table, the letter open in front of me, unsure how to feel. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix everything. But it didn't sound like the old lines either. It didn't say "call me when you're calmer" or "let's forget this ever happened." Said "I see you." Maybe for the first time. I didn't respond right away. I brought the letter to therapy instead. My therapist read it slowly, then looked up. "How does it feel to read those words?" "Strange," I said. "Like it's real. But also, like I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to do anything with it yet," she said. "Sometimes acknowledgement is enough for now." So I put the letter away. A week later I sent a short note back. "Mom, thank you for writing to me. I appreciate the honesty in your letter. I'm not ready for a conversation yet, but I wanted to let you know I received it. Laura." No warmth but no coldness either. Just the truth. A boundary that wasn't harsh. Just firm. I didn't hear back after that. And honestly, that was okay. Over the next few months, things got quieter in the best way. No more anxious phone calls. No more guilt texts. My weekends belonged to me again. I started volunteering at a local shelter on Sundays, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. I began reconnecting with friends I'd lost touch with, people who asked how I was and actually listened to the answer. One Saturday, Amanda and I hosted a small dinner at my place. Nothing fancy, just pasta, wine, music. A couple friends, some stories, a lot of laughter. At one point I looked around the room and thought, this is what a table is supposed to feel like. No one had to fight for a seat. No one was forgotten in the corner. Everyone brought something, even if it was just themselves. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full in a way that had nothing to do with food. Around midnight, after everyone had gone, Amanda and I sat on the floor with tea and leftover brownies. She leaned back against the couch and said, "You seem different. Lighter." "I feel different," I said. "I stopped begging people to love me the way I needed. And I started loving myself the way I deserved." She smiled. "That's the line. Right there." We toasted our mugs. Spring came. Then summer. My mom never pushed again. She didn't show up unannounced or send emotional voicemails. Maybe she was giving me space. Maybe she was waiting. Either way, I was finally the one in control of the story. One day in early July, my dad called. I didn't pick up. He left a message. "Hey, it's Dad. I heard you got promoted." "That's good. Just wanted to say that. Hope you're doing okay." I saved the message. I didn't return the call. Maybe I will one day. Maybe not. But it didn't eat at me like it used to. I wasn't trying to earn points anymore. I wasn't playing the game. The truth is, I didn't walk away from my family because I stopped loving them. I walked away because I finally started loving myself. Because I was tired of shrinking to fit into spaces that never had room for me. Because I got tired of proving my worth to people who only saw what they wanted. And once I stopped trying so hard to be accepted, I started to feel free. Now, when I set a table, I count the chairs carefully. Not to make sure everyone fits, but to make sure no one sits where they're not wanted. Including me. Sometimes I still feel that old ache. Usually around the holidays. Usually when I hear someone say family. Like it's a given. Like it's always safe. But then I remember what I've built. Who I've chosen. Who's chosen me back. And I remember I'm not alone anymore. I never really was. I was just waiting for the wrong people to notice.